"Anna, you're terminated for embezzlement," Director Williams announced loudly, his voice echoing across the entire office floor of North Peak Engineering in Denver, Colorado. The words hit me like a physical blow, and I felt my face drain of color as every single person in the building turned to stare at me. I stood there frozen, my coffee mug still warm in my hands, unable to process what was happening. My name is Anna Brooks. I'm 29 years old, and until that moment, I had been the senior project coordinator at North Peak Engineering for the past 4 years. I loved my job, took pride in managing complex construction projects, and had never so much as taken an extra pen home from the office. The accusation of embezzlement felt like someone had just accused me of murder. "Pack your things immediately," Director Williams continued, his face red with what I assumed was righteous anger. "Security will escort you out. We have evidence of your theft, and we're considering pressing charges." The office remained dead silent, except for the hum of computers and the distant sound of traffic outside. My colleagues, people I had worked alongside for years, shared lunches with, celebrated birthdays with, all stared at me with a mixture of shock and judgment. I could see some of them whispering to each other, probably wondering how they had missed the signs that I was supposedly a criminal. I wanted to defend myself, to scream that this was all wrong, but my throat felt like it was closing up. Instead, I numbly walked to my desk and began placing my personal items into a cardboard box that security had provided. My hands shook as I picked up the framed photo of my parents, the small succulent plant I had been nursing for 2 years, and the coffee mug with "World's Okayest Engineer" that my best friend had given me for my birthday. The walk to the elevator felt like a death march. Every step echoed in the silence, and I could feel dozens of eyes burning into my back. Director Williams followed behind me, probably to make sure I didn't steal anything else on my way out. The security guard pressed the elevator button, and as we waited, I caught sight of Vanessa Taylor, the accounting manager, standing near the copy machine. She quickly looked away when our eyes met, but something about her expression struck me as odd. Not surprised, but almost guilty. As the elevator doors closed, sealing my fate and my humiliation, I realized that my carefully built career and reputation had just been destroyed in front of everyone I worked with. Whatever evidence they thought they had, I knew I was innocent, but that didn't seem to matter anymore. The elevator ride down felt endless, giving me too much time to think about how my life had just imploded. I had started at North Peak Engineering fresh out of college, eager to prove myself in the male-dominated construction industry. Over the years, I had worked my way up from junior coordinator to senior project coordinator, earning respect through long hours, attention to detail, and successful project completions. My relationship with Director Williams had always been professional but distant. He was the type of manager who preferred to stay in his office, leaving the day-to-day operations to his team. I reported directly to him on major projects, and while he had never been particularly warm, he had seemed satisfied with my work. Just last month, he had even mentioned the possibility of a promotion during my performance review. The thought of Vanessa Taylor's strange expression in the office kept nagging at me. Vanessa had been with the company for 6 years, 2 years longer than me, and handled all the financial aspects of our projects. She was responsible for budget tracking, expense reports, and coordinating with our accounting department. If money was missing from projects, she would be one of the first people to know about it. I had always found Vanessa to be somewhat cold and competitive, especially when it came to recognition from upper management. She often made subtle comments about how project coordinators got all the credit while accounting did all the real work. There had been a few instances where I had caught small discrepancies in budget reports, which she had quickly corrected, claiming they were simple clerical errors. As the security guard walked me to my car in the parking garage, I tried to remember any warning signs I might have missed. Had there been unusual behavior from Director Williams lately? Had anyone seemed suspicious? The only thing that stood out was that Vanessa had been working late more frequently in recent weeks, often staying after most of the office had gone home. I sat in my car for several minutes after the security guard left, staring at the concrete wall in front of me. My phone buzzed with a text message from my roommate asking how my day was going. How could I possibly explain that I had been publicly humiliated and fired for a crime I didn't commit? The thought of facing anyone right now felt overwhelming. The financial implications began to sink in as I drove home. I had some savings, but nothing that would last long without a steady income. Finding another job in my field would be nearly impossible if word spread about the embezzlement accusations. Who would hire someone with that kind of cloud hanging over them? But beneath the fear and humiliation, something else was growing. A cold, determined anger. Someone had set me up, and I was starting to have a pretty good idea who that someone might be. I wasn't going to let my career and reputation be destroyed without a fight. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, methodically going through every email, every project file, and every document I had saved on my personal devices from work. If someone had framed me for embezzlement, there had to be a trail, and I was determined to find it. As I scrolled through months of correspondence, certain patterns began to emerge. Several times over the past 6 months, Vanessa had requested changes to budget allocations for various projects, always with reasonable explanations. A delayed shipment here, an unexpected cost overrun there. Nothing that seemed suspicious at the time. But looking at it all together, I noticed that these changes often involved transferring funds between different project accounts. What made it more interesting was that many of these email requests had come late in the evening or on weekends, when most of the office was empty. Vanessa would send me detailed explanations for the budget modifications, and I would approve them based on her expertise and authority over financial matters. After all, she was the accounting manager, and I trusted her professional judgment. I found one email thread that particularly caught my attention. 3 weeks ago, Vanessa had urgently requested approval to transfer $15,000 from the Henderson project budget to cover unexpected environmental compliance costs on the Morrison project. She had explained that the client needed the work completed immediately, and we would bill them separately for the additional expense. I had approved the transfer, thinking nothing of it. But now, reviewing the thread more carefully, I noticed something odd. The original email from Vanessa had a timestamp of 11:47 p.m. on a Friday night. Who stays that late to process routine budget transfers? And why the urgency for something that could have waited until Monday? I started creating a spreadsheet, documenting every budget modification I had approved over the past year. The amounts weren't huge individually, usually between $5,000 and $20,000, but they added up to a significant sum. More importantly, I realized that I had been approving transfers of money that I didn't actually have the authority to move. As project coordinator, I could approve project expenses, but major budget reallocations should have required Director Williams' signature. The more I dug into my files, the more convinced I became that I had been systematically manipulated. Vanessa had been using my authorization to move money between accounts, probably with forged or altered documentation. When the missing funds were discovered, all the evidence would point back to me, because my approvals were on everything. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't just been fired. I had been expertly set up by someone I had trusted. Vanessa had spent months building a paper trail that would implicate me while covering her own tracks. The late-night emails, the urgent requests, the complex explanations. It had all been calculated to make me an unwitting accomplice in my own downfall. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, feeling a mixture of vindication and fury. I knew who had destroyed my career, but proving it would be another matter entirely. However, I wasn't going to let Vanessa get away with this without a fight. The next morning, I woke up with a splitting headache and the grim realization that my professional life was in shambles. I had barely slept, spending most of the night going through documents and building my case against Vanessa. But having suspicions and having proof were two very different things. I decided to drive to North Peak Engineering's office, not to try to get my job back, but to observe. I parked across the street where I could see the employee entrance and waited. At 8:15 a.m., I watched Vanessa pull into the parking lot in her usual spot. What struck me as odd was how calm and composed she looked for someone whose colleague had just been fired for embezzlement the day before. Around 10 a.m., my phone rang. The caller ID showed Director Williams's number, and my heart started racing. Had he realized his mistake? Was he calling to apologize and offer me my job back? "Anna," his voice was strained when I answered. "I need you to come back to the office immediately. There's been a development." "What kind of development?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just get here as soon as possible. We'll discuss it when you arrive." 20 minutes later, I found myself back in the same building where I had been humiliated the day before. This time, Director Williams met me at the security desk himself, looking frazzled and avoiding eye contact. He led me to his office in silence, and I noticed that several employees stopped their conversations to stare at me as we passed. "Anna, sit down," he said, closing his office door behind us. "I'm afraid I owe you a significant apology." I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "It appears there was an error in our investigation. The financial discrepancies we discovered they weren't caused by your actions." He ran his hand through his hair, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Our accounting department identified some irregularities in budget transfers that led us to believe you had been embezzling funds." "And now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Now we've discovered that the documentation supporting those transfers was falsified. The real perpetrator appears to be someone with much greater access to our financial systems than we initially realized." I felt a surge of vindication, but it was quickly overshadowed by anger. "So you're saying I was fired, publicly humiliated, and accused of a crime based on false evidence?" Director Williams winced. "I understand your frustration, Anna. We acted hastily, and that was inexcusable. I'm prepared to offer you your position back immediately, along with a formal apology and compensation for this terrible mistake." "What about the real embezzler?" I asked, though I already suspected I knew the answer. His expression grew even more uncomfortable. "We're still investigating, but we have identified a person of interest. I can't share details while the investigation is ongoing, but I can assure you that appropriate action will be taken." I stood up slowly, looking directly at him. "Director Williams, yesterday you accused me of theft in front of the entire office. You had security escort me out like a criminal. You destroyed my reputation, and my standing with my colleagues based on what you're now telling me was obviously falsified evidence. Anna, please. And now you want me to just come back and pretend none of this happened? To walk back into that office where everyone thinks I'm a thief?" He opened his mouth to respond, but I continued. "How long have you known it wasn't me? How long have you known you made a mistake?" The silence stretched between us for several long moments before he finally answered. "We began to suspect there were problems with the evidence late yesterday afternoon. We've been working through the night to verify our findings. So you've known since yesterday that you probably fired an innocent person, and you waited until now to call me?" His face flushed red, and I could see he realized how damaging his admission was. The company had known they might have made a catastrophic error, and had chosen to wait rather than immediately reaching out to fix their mistake. I picked up my purse and headed for the door. "I'll be in touch, Director Williams," through my attorney. As I walked out of Director Williams's office for the second time in 2 days, I felt a strange sense of calm, despite the storm of emotions churning inside me. The vindication of being proven innocent was overwhelmed by the fury of realizing how poorly the situation had been handled. More importantly, I now had confirmation that there was real evidence of fraud, which meant Vanessa's carefully constructed scheme was falling apart. I drove straight to a coffee shop near my apartment and called my friend Jessica, who worked as a paralegal at a prominent employment law firm. After explaining the situation, she immediately connected me with her boss, attorney Patricia Morrison, who agreed to meet with me that afternoon. "This is one of the most egregious cases of wrongful termination I've seen in years," Attorney Morrison said after reviewing my timeline of events. The public humiliation aspect alone gives us significant grounds for a lawsuit, but the fact that they waited nearly 24 hours to contact you after discovering their error shows a deliberate disregard for the damage they were causing to your reputation. What about the person who actually embezzled the money? I asked. That's a separate criminal matter, but it supports our civil case. The company's failure to conduct a proper investigation before terminating you demonstrates negligence. She leaned forward in her chair. Anna, I want you to understand that this isn't just about getting your job back. This is about holding them accountable for the damage they've done to your career and reputation. That evening, I received a call from Director Williams again. This time his tone was noticeably different, more cautious, almost pleading. Anna, I've spoken with our legal department, and we're prepared to offer a more comprehensive compensation package. We understand the gravity of our error, and we want to make this right. What exactly are you offering? I asked. Full reinstatement with a promotion to senior project manager, a 20% salary increase, and a settlement payment to compensate for the distress this has caused. I almost laughed at the transparency of their panic. Director Williams, let me be clear about something. This isn't just about money or a job title. You destroyed my reputation in front of my colleagues and accused me of a serious crime. That's not something you can fix with a promotion and a raise. What would it take for you to consider returning? Complete transparency about your investigation and the identity of the real embezzler. I want to know exactly what happened and how you plan to clear my name publicly. There was a long pause before he responded. Anna, I can't discuss ongoing investigations, but I can tell you that we've taken decisive action regarding the individual responsible. Decisive action meaning what? Another pause. The person in question is no longer with the company. So Vanessa had been fired. I felt a satisfaction in knowing that her scheme had been discovered, but it wasn't enough. She had tried to destroy my career and reputation to cover her own crimes, and simply losing her job seemed like a minor consequence, compared to what she had put me through. Director Williams, I appreciate the call, but I won't be returning to North Peak Engineering. My attorney will be in touch regarding the wrongful termination lawsuit we'll be filing. Anna, please reconsider. We can work this out without involving lawyers. You should have thought about that before you decided to publicly humiliate me based on falsified evidence, I said, and hung up. As I sat in my apartment that evening, I realized that this situation had revealed something important about North Peak Engineering's culture and leadership. The fact that they had acted so hastily, with such poor judgment, and then tried to cover their tracks rather than immediately addressing their mistake, told me everything I needed to know about working there. The following week brought a series of revelations that confirmed my worst suspicions about Vanessa's scheme. Attorney Morrison had filed a formal records request with North Peak Engineering, and their legal team, clearly eager to avoid a public trial, had been surprisingly cooperative in providing documentation. Anna, you need to see this, Attorney Morrison said during our meeting on Friday morning. She spread several documents across her conference table. These are the original budget transfer requests that Vanessa submitted, along with the documentation she provided to support them. I examined the papers carefully. The transfer requests looked exactly like the ones I remembered approving, but the supporting documentation told a different story. Purchase orders had been altered, client communications had been falsified, and project timelines had been manipulated to justify moving money between accounts. Look at this one. Attorney Morrison pointed to a transfer request from 2 months ago. Vanessa claimed that the Riverside Plaza project needed an emergency budget increase due to unexpected foundation problems. She provided what appeared to be a communication from the structural engineer recommending additional work. I studied the document. But this engineer's letterhead looks wrong. The logo is slightly different from the ones I've seen before. Exactly. We contacted the engineering firm directly, and they confirmed they never sent this communication. Vanessa fabricated it entirely. The sophistication of Vanessa's fraud was becoming clear. She hadn't simply stolen money. She had created an elaborate scheme involving forged documents, falsified communications, and manipulated budget reports. She had been systematically siphoning funds from multiple projects over several months, using my approval authority to legitimize the transfers. "How much money are we talking about?" I asked. "Based on the documentation they've provided so far, approximately $87,000 across 6 different projects." I felt sick. Vanessa had stolen nearly $90,000 and had been prepared to let me take the blame for all of it. If Director Williams hadn't discovered the fraud was more sophisticated than initially believed, I would have been facing criminal charges. "There's something else," Attorney Morrison continued. North Peak's internal investigation revealed that Vanessa had been accessing the company's financial systems outside of normal business hours. She was logging in remotely on weekends and holidays to make changes to records and delete evidence of her activities. So she was covering her tracks? Extensively, but she made one crucial mistake. The company's IT department maintains backup logs of all system activity, and those showed the pattern of after-hours access. When they cross-referenced those logs with the timing of budget discrepancies, it became obvious that someone with administrative access to financial systems was manipulating records. I thought about all the late-night emails Vanessa had sent me, requesting approvals for budget changes. She had been working on her scheme during off-hours, probably thinking she could avoid detection by conducting her fraudulent activities when no one else was around. "What's particularly damaging for North Peak," Attorney Morrison added, "is that their investigation showed multiple red flags that should have been caught much earlier. Vanessa's pattern of after-hours system access had been going on for months, but no one in management was monitoring for that kind of suspicious activity. So they're liable not just for wrongfully firing me, but for failing to prevent the fraud in the first place." Exactly. Their negligent oversight allowed Vanessa to continue her scheme for months, and when they finally discovered the missing money, they conducted such a poor investigation that they accused the wrong person. As I left Attorney Morrison's office that afternoon, I felt a growing sense of confidence about our case. Vanessa's fraud had been extensive and well documented, and North Peak's incompetent handling of the situation had made their legal position virtually indefensible. But more than that, I realized I no longer wanted anything to do with a company that had shown such poor judgment and leadership. 3 weeks after my wrongful termination, Attorney Morrison called with news that would completely vindicate me and expose the full extent of North Peak Engineering's negligence. "Anna, the district attorney's office has decided to press charges against Vanessa Taylor for embezzlement and fraud," she said. "They're also investigating whether to pursue charges against Director Williams for negligent supervision." "Criminal charges against Director Williams?" I asked, surprised. The investigation revealed that he ignored multiple warning signs about unusual financial activity. Apparently, North Peak's external auditors had flagged irregularities in project budgets during their last review, but Williams dismissed their concerns without proper investigation. The news got even better. More importantly for our case, North Peak's board of directors has decided to settle rather than face a public trial. They're offering a settlement of $250,000, plus a public statement acknowledging that you were wrongfully terminated and that you had no involvement in any financial impropriety. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Not only would I be financially compensated for the damage to my career, but my reputation would be publicly cleared. What about the public statement? They've agreed to send a formal apology to all employees and clients, explicitly stating that you were innocent of all charges and that their investigation was flawed. They'll also provide positive references for any future employment opportunities. That afternoon, I received a call from an unexpected source. Megan Walsh, one of my former colleagues at North Peak, had heard about the settlement. "Anna, I had to call and apologize," she said. "We all believed what Williams told us about you, and we should have known better. You were always the most honest person in that office." "I appreciate that, Megan. It means more than you know. There's something else you should know. After word got out about Vanessa and the settlement, 3 more employees have come forward with concerns about Williams' management. There's talk that the board might force him to resign." The thought of Director Williams facing consequences for his incompetent leadership felt like perfect justice. He had been so eager to publicly humiliate me based on false evidence, and now his own career was in jeopardy because of his negligent oversight and poor judgment. 2 months later, I was sitting in the office of Marcus Thompson, the CEO of Driftline Construction, one of Denver's most respected engineering firms. He had contacted me directly after hearing about my situation through industry connections. "Anna, I've reviewed your work history and spoken with several people who worked with you at North Peak," he said. "Everyone speaks very highly of your skills and integrity. We'd like to offer you a position as our senior project manager, with a starting salary that's 30% higher than what you were making before." I accepted the position immediately. Driftline Construction had an excellent reputation in the industry, and working there would not only restore my career, but advance it significantly. On my first day at Driftline, I received a text message from Attorney Morrison. "Vanessa Taylor pled guilty to embezzlement and fraud. She's been sentenced to 18 months in prison and ordered to pay full restitution. Director Williams submitted his resignation yesterday." The news felt like the final piece of justice falling into place. Vanessa was facing real consequences for her crimes, and Williams was paying the price for his incompetent leadership. That evening, I called my parents to share the good news about my new job. "I'm proud of how you handled this situation," my mother said. "You could have been bitter and angry, but instead you fought back professionally and restored your reputation." She was right. I had refused to be a victim of someone else's criminal behavior, and I had used the legal system to hold both Vanessa and North Peak accountable for their actions. As I prepared for my second day at Driftline Construction, I felt genuinely excited about my career for the first time in months. I had not only survived Vanessa's attempt to destroy me, but I had emerged stronger and more confident than before. Vanessa Taylor's elaborate embezzlement scheme ultimately led to her complete downfall. After pleading guilty to fraud and embezzlement charges, she was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and ordered to pay $87,000 in restitution to North Peak Engineering. Her conviction made her unemployable in any financial or administrative role, effectively ending her career in the industry. The criminal record followed her for life, serving as a permanent reminder of how her greed and willingness to destroy an innocent colleague had backfired catastrophically. Director Williams faced his own consequences for his negligent oversight and rush to judgment. After the board of directors reviewed the investigation, they concluded that his failure to properly supervise financial controls and his hasty decision to publicly terminate me without due process demonstrated unfitness for leadership. He was forced to resign in disgrace, and the public nature of his failure made finding comparable employment extremely difficult. As I settled into my new role at Driftline Construction, I reflected on the entire experience with a mixture of satisfaction and hard-earned wisdom. The $250,000 settlement had provided financial security, but more importantly, the public vindication had restored my professional reputation completely. I had learned that fighting back against injustice, even when the odds seemed overwhelming, was not only possible but necessary for maintaining one's integrity and self-respect. Looking back on my revenge journey, I realized that the best form of justice had been letting the legal system and the truth speak for themselves. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to be a victim and allowing those who wronged you to face the natural consequences of their own poor choices.